Hey trainers, today we have a bit of a different video because recently the streamers like Super Tits and Spraggles made a bunch of videos analyzing the current meta. So they use their information from this new website called Unite API, which basically analyzed a bunch of master ranked gameplay, like I think over 100,000 gameplays, and they collated the win rate of every Pokemon. So based on the details under Unite API, Decidueye in the current meta is really underperforming because it has a win rate of 45.1%, which is pretty low compared to like Dragonite, which has a 53% win rate. So today what we're gonna do is I'm gonna try to explain how does Decidueye work and what makes his kit so bad in this current meta, and as well as how we can buff Decidueye such that we can maintain Decidueye's playstyle, yet at the same time make him more viable for the current meta. Alright, so before we analyze what makes Decidueye struggle so much in this current meta, I thought it would be best to first do an analysis of Decidueye's abilities and describe how he is meant to be played optimally. So I'm by no means a master Decidueye player. Decidueye is not my main Pokemon, but nonetheless I think I've played enough rounds with Decidueye to get a solid grasp of its abilities, and I know the theory behind what makes Decidueye work. So first and foremost, I just have to say that Decidueye's primary source of damage is gonna come from the basic attack. That is because Decidueye's passive abilities greatly supports the damage output from its basic attack. The passive ability basically increases the speed of basic attacks every time one hits, so this effect can be stacked. Basically, the more you hit with Decidueye's basic attack, the faster it gets, the more damage you do. So this is unlike other Pokemon such as Cramorant and Pikachu that depends heavily on its abilities, its moveset. Decidueye primarily hits with its basic attack. So now we come to Decidueye's moveset. For the first moveset, we have a choice between Razor Leaf and Spirit Shackle. Razor Leaf is very basic. What it does is it increases the attack speed of your basic attack, so it synergizes very well with your passive ability. The more you hit, the higher the damage. Spirit Shackle acts more like a snipe ability, so you load up your ability and it hits for a far distance for a set amount of damage. The longer you load, the more damage it does, and it shackles the opponent to the ground such that the movement speed is slowed. So Spirit Shackle is great for stealing objectives and chasing down the opponents that are running away with low HP, while Razor Leaf primarily synergizes well with Decidueye's overall basic attack. Personally, I prefer Razor Leaf, but I feel that both movesets are viable for Decidueye. So for the second moveset, we have a choice between Shadow Snake and Leaf Storm. So what Shadow Snake does is that it increases your movement speed and it targets one of your opponent. When the shadow goes over to the opponent, this is a sure hit ability. It decreases the movement speed and defense of your opponent, while at the same time increasing your movement speed. So it's good for scouting out opponents because Shadow Snake actually hits the invisible opponents in the bush as well, and the defense down ability would help you chase down weakened enemies and help you take care of them faster. It would aid in a team fight because it would weaken an enemy, you can take it out first. What Leaf Storm does is that it creates a Tempest of Leaf that deals damage to your opponent, and if your opponent is at point blank range, that means as close to Decidueye as possible, it would shove your opponent away. So on paper that seems like a very good ability, but it's rarely used, and I'll explain why later, as it doesn't really fit with the playstyle of Decidueye. So Decidueye recently had two of its movesets buffed as well. So Leaf Storm and Spirit Shackle got buffed. What the buff on 20th of December entailed for Spirit Shackle is that it's a cooldown reduction, I think from 7 seconds to 5 seconds. So of course that is good, you can use Spirit Shackle more. For Leaf Storm on the other hand, it increased the shove distance as well as the damage that it does to the opponent, both of which I would say are welcome additions or welcome buff for Decidueye, but it really doesn't solve the core issue of what makes Decidueye struggle so much this meta. So Decidueye is very squishy, it has very low HP, and it doesn't have much in terms of survivability. So except for Shadow Snake, which provides it with a little bit of movement speed, Decidueye dies very easily. And it's a glass cannon, meaning that it does a lot of damage, but it dies very easily. That by itself is not an issue, because we do have other Pokemon that are glass cannons as well. Pikachu is a glass cannon, Cramorant is a glass cannon, I would say that Cinderace is also a glass cannon. But the difference between Decidueye and these are three other examples, let's take Pikachu for example, is that Pikachu in a team battle, it can come into the battle, use its burst damage, use its abilities, Thunderbolt, and then it can safely get out and wait for its cooldown to come back up before it jumps into the fray again and does damage again. Decidueye on the other hand can't do that because his passive ability, Decidueye's passive ability, requires it to constantly be doing basic damage or basic attacks on the opponent. So if Decidueye stacks its basic attacks and gets its increased basic attack speed, but decides to get out of the battle, when it returns again, the buffs are gone. The buffs from the passives are gone. It will be doing very low damage again until it stacks up. What this means is that Decidueye has to always be within basic attack range of the opponent, whilst other Pokemon such as Cramorant and Pikachu can get out of the battle or head somewhere safe and come back again after repositioning, meaning that Decidueye is very important for Decidueye to be in the right position at the right time. Positioning is key when playing Decidueye. Cinderace is sort of different. Cinderace has its escape mechanisms, and at the same time Cinderace does burst damage on the spot. So it comes into a battle, it does a lot of damage. Decidueye does pretty low damage at the start until it gets enough stacks where it can out-damage the other glass cannons. But with its squishy HP, having to remain in battle to get the stacks up, most of the time Decidueye dies before the passive ability stacks up enough for it to make a difference in battle. Against the teams that aren't as good, against more inexperienced teams, it works fine. You know, Decidueye will come in, he will get enough stacks for its abilities, and then you will basically decimate the opponent. But against opponents that actually know what they're doing, especially in higher ranked masters or against preformed teams, Decidueye is basically target number one. So you go into a battle, the first thing that the opponent is going to do is they are going to target and kill Decidueye because it's the easiest to kill, it's the fastest to kill. Talon Flame, for example, will just use fly over Decidueye's head, drop down, Decidueye dies on the spot. And in solo queue especially, you are very dependent on your team to do well. So in solo queue, you're gonna need your supports to protect Decidueye, you're gonna need heals and stuff, and there isn't that much in terms of synergizing with your team in solo queue for Decidueye to be viable. The buff that Decidueye got on the 20th of December doesn't really aid in the struggles that Decidueye face, or it doesn't really make up for its weaknesses. So for example, Spirit Shackle had its cooldown reduced from 7 seconds to 5 seconds, but Spirit Shackle's utility or primary use is to snipe a Pokemon from afar or to steal objectives. So I feel that instead of a lowered cooldown, what should have been done was a boost in damage instead. Cause lowered cooldown does nothing much. Decidueye is not meant to be played in the far range away from normal attack range, because as mentioned earlier, most of its damage is going to be coming from the stacks of passive ability and its basic attack. So you are not gonna be all the way behind and spamming Spirit Shackle. So what should have been done was damage boost instead. Now when it comes to Leaf Storm, even with the buff on the 20th of December, it still doesn't seem to be particularly useful as a pick for Decidueye. The reason for that is that if you are picking Leaf Storm, you are basically giving Shadow Sneak a miss, and Shadow Sneak does give Decidueye the much needed survivability, even though it's not that much of a dash. And at the same time, even with the buff to Leaf Storm, you need to be in point blank range with an opponent in order to shove them away. So the problem with that is that Decidueye isn't meant to be in point blank range in the first place. Decidueye is so squishy that if you find yourself in a situation where you're in point blank range, chances are you would already be half dead or dead before you get to use Leaf Storm. So Leaf Storm by itself, not very viable. Alright, now that we have summarized the issues or the drawbacks of playing as Decidueye, I have a few suggestions of how Decidueye should be buffed, such that it doesn't become overpowered but at the same time makes it viable for the current meta. So of course I'm not talking about merely boosting his damage or making Decidueye's HP thicker, because that goes against the playstyle of Decidueye. Decidueye isn't meant to be a tanky Pokemon, isn't meant to be played like Dragonite, and at the same time boosting damage is kind of a cop-out. It doesn't really aid in playstyle. So my first suggestion is that they can increase the attack range, the basic attack range of Decidueye. So maybe increase it by 25% or even 50%, such that it is able to basic attack the opponent from a further range. So with that 25% to 50% increase, Decidueye would be at a safer position that it had been, and at the same time, if it's not done properly, so even with that increased attack range, if someone doesn't position themselves properly throughout the fight, they are still open to being ganked by the opponent. The second suggestion that I have if Decidueye's attack range is not buffed is to buff its passive ability. What I mean by that is that currently, when Decidueye gets out of battle, when it stops doing normal attack, the stacks that it had gotten for its passive expires really quickly. So what we can do is for Decidueye to retain those stacks for a longer period of time. This will allow Decidueye to safely get out of the battle and reposition itself or heal up before coming back in, without fear that the stacked passive abilities would disappear. That would give Decidueye more leeway to reposition, even though this by itself does not aid Decidueye that much when it comes to a 1v1 fight. All in all, I think that's all I have for Decidueye. Even though Decidueye suffers from its weaknesses, it's still a very fun Pokemon to play with its stack mechanics, with the amount of damage that it does. Even though I haven't been very successful when playing Decidueye, I still find myself coming back to this Pokemon just because of how fun it is. So I do hope that with future updates, they are able to balance this Pokemon well enough so that Decidueye is more viable in ranked games.